Chair now calls Lauren Johnson, the illustrious Lauren Johnson.
I was so excited to hear y'all say Happy Valentine's Day. My 12-year-old, his birthday is today, so it's never been Valentine's Day anymore.
Okay.
So thank you for that well
Happy
wish.
birthday to him.
Yeah.
Yes.
My name is Lauren Johnson. I work at the ACLU of Texas. We are also a founding member of the Smart on Crime Coalition. And, you were asking Doug about women's justice issues, and that is my focus this coming session. So in Texas, we've got 12,500, give or take, women in our system. And you heard earlier that we've seen a decrease in crime, we've seen a decrease in incarceration, and yet our women's incarceration rates have gone up. And so that is one of the, also by sheer number, that is more than any other state. So while we may be trailblazing in a lot of ways, this is an area that we've got some work to do, folks. So the reasons that women are incarcerated are a little bit different than what drives men's incarceration. And the majority of them are there for crimes related to poverty and substance use, and the majority of these women have histories of childhood abuse, adult sexual abuse, and domestic violence. And so a couple of the solutions that we see kind of on the horizon this session are things related to dignity for women who are incarcerated, trauma screenings upon intake so that we can build better rehabilitative programming for the women, access to the most basic needs, feminine hygiene products. In our Texas prisons, everybody wears white clothes. And technically, you're not officially allowed to wash those clothes yourself. You have to take them to the laundry. So even in instances where you have an accident, and that accident is because you don't have access to the proper supplies, you could theoretically get in trouble for washing your uniform. So we believe that that should not be a struggle in 2019 for women. And then thinking about the things that drive women into prison, we also think that we could be diverting a lot more of these women. And so primary caretaker diversion is something that we've been looking at. And I think that this bill or this policy would make a difference because I think it would have made a difference for me. I've been to prison 3 times. I started using drugs at the age of 14 years old. 16 years ago, I was sitting in our county jail pregnant with my first child. And I was sentenced to prison, and I came home a week before he turned a year old. I came home, I married his father, we bought a home, we had 2 more children, one of whom is having a birthday today. And we rebuilt our lives, but as is the case with most people in recovery, relapse is a rule, not necessarily an exception. So 5 years later, I had a relapse. I was arrested for trace amounts. But because I had a criminal history, they would not consider me for probation. Although this was the best time of all of my interactions with the system, this was the time that I was most ready and viable for a community supervision. I had built a life outside. I had people that were depending on me, but they wouldn't consider me for that, and they sentenced me to 7 months in state jail. Now, my husband and I could have lost our home if we hadn't had the support of some friends moving in with us because he couldn't have paid child care for 3 children and a mortgage. And the thing that I'll say is that 7 months didn't do anything for me. I didn't have access to meaningful programs. There was no treatment. There was nothing but a waste of resources for my incarceration and the impact that it had on my children. And that's not a short-lived thing. Quite a while after my incarceration, I remember having a casual conversation with my husband and telling him that I needed to go to court because I had gotten a traffic ticket. A little while later, I find my son sobbing into his pillow, scared that he's going to lose his mother again. And so my son's story isn't unique, and he actually had a lot more support than most of the children in these situations have. And the packets that I gave you, which was probably a little bit overkill, I apologize, have research and data to support all of the impacts of parental incarceration that happens to children. So 64% of the kids that we have in our juvenile justice system have a parent that's been incarcerated. Children that have an incarcerated parent have poorer eating and sleeping habits than their peers. They have higher instances of homelessness. They're more susceptible to human trafficking. And they have more behavioral health and mental health issues, even compared to kids that have lost a parent due to death or divorce. I think that that's something that we can look at, and considering that we have better outcomes for less money with community supervision, I think we need to be focusing on diverting as many people as is appropriate. So those are a couple of the things that I'll be tackling this year with the illustrious Lindsay Linder, my partner in criminal justice reform. Will be working on these women's issues this session, and I'm happy to answer questions or come speak with you at your offices in depth.
Chair recognizes Representative Niave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony today. I think it's appropriate timing for yesterday, Mr. Chairman. I had a chance to go scheduled a tour with the largest women's prison in Texas, a Crane unit, to try to see for myself and get an understanding of the issues that impact women. And one of the things that I was learning, especially as I was reading, is that a lot of the women, from my understanding, a high percentage of them don't have a GED. So I was really impressed with the unit's classes that they provided. Is that something that you're hearing is happening across all of the units for women, or is it just this unit that I came to that just happened to have all of the, to me, what seemed like really useful tools for the women?
So I think the Wyndham School District is across our prison system, right? And they do prioritize GEDs for people. Although I do have people that, because even with 4-year sentences, because they were in their 40s, weren't prioritized on the list for getting a GED. And so there's a lot of variables that go into whether somebody has access to the programming that exists within the system. And outside of GED programming, I mean, we've got some really amazing programs, but they're kind of piecemeal depending on where the unit is and who is out there to volunteer and do things with the folks on those units. So, you know, we could be doing more, but there's certainly some really excellent programs that are happening.
And I have another question with respect to the pretrial diversion, because I don't know if Texas has this, but we saw that in another state, I think it's Oregon, has a pretrial diversion for the parental, I guess when you're the primary caretaker, and then they just expanded it to include pregnant mothers. So when you're talking about that, is that because Texas doesn't have that as an option period?
So in Texas, we've got the Babies and Mothers Bonding Initiative, which is a program that's near Houston. They work with, I think, Santa Maria Hostel. It's underutilized to some degree, but also in thinking about, so I have actually a friend who was one of the first people that would have gotten into that program, except that her son, so that she spent her incarceration planning for that. She went to UTMB, went to have the baby with plans of going into that program, and then when her son was born, he had some severe medical health needs. And so now they're scrambling around trying to figure out not only what to do with her son, because they hadn't planned for his care or anything like that, but also now she has to go back to prison. And so, like, really thinking through the public health impacts of incarcerating a parent, but also the drivers of women's incarceration. Is that really necessary? Are we seeking revenge, or are we seeking rehabilitation? And with children being such a huge motivating factor for women, I think that we could build programmings that live outside of the system that could better support that.
I'd like to work with you or talk to you afterwards.
I'd love to.
Chair recognizes Representative Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman White, and good morning. Thank you for coming out to testify today, and I commend you for using your life in rehabilitating, being rehabilitated, and using it to help others. So thank you for that. The program that you were speaking with Representative Niave, was that Bambi that you were talking about down in Houston? Someone mentioned that to us because we have some legislation that I'd like to talk to you about as well for women. But I do want to ask you to share a little bit more about your speaking about women that are incarcerated and not having access to feminine hygiene products, and the fact that they could get in trouble for trying to clean their clothing. And I do understand that their garments are white, and it just seems very demeaning to me. So.
It is. So TDCJ provides one package of 30 pads and 6 tampons to women once a month. Outside of that, you have to beg, borrow, and steal them, and women don't have the same.
How many in the packaging again? I just want to
30 pads.
Package, 30 pads. Okay.
pads that don't have wings, which, you know, some of the guys may not want to engage in this, but some of the ladies know that this is an important.
Yeah, I have to go mine on behalf.
Well, welcome to our world, gentlemen.
Right.
So they get supplies, but the quality and the quantity is, we think that women shouldn't have to beg for their basic needs.
No.
And currently it's kind of this system where if you run out, if there's not somebody available to offer one to you, and I shouldn't have said steal, but if there's not somebody that can loan you one or give you one, you have to go and ask the officer, and then you may get one or two, but then there you are again in 2 hours waiting.
But by then you've probably already had an accident. Okay.
So I am certainly happy to come and visit with all of you in your offices, and I really look forward to, I think we've got a clear pathway towards making some positive steps for all of us, and I really look forward to working with you to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Real quick here, thank you for your testimony and your responses. And we do have some of our management team from the department, and we're not going to call them up. You know, we can figure it out. And like I would tell any government agency, there's probably bills coming
Probably.
to look at this, and I want to stay within our house rules and not talk about any specific bills. So there may be stuff coming up. Okay, however,
Stay tuned.
However, regardless of the department. Some things don't necessarily need legislation. You can start doing it now. So yes, you go to a unit. The standard thing is a white uniform, right? That's extremely interesting based on the topic that you've talked about this morning. I don't. Maybe the department will visit the members and discuss why for the 8%, because that's what we were told last week, 8% of our incarcerated justice involved are women. So if that's the case, and I understand efficiency and all of that, what's the security ramifications if you went to blue? I don't know. Orange, or maybe you don't want orange. There's a book about that. But something, okay, something else, okay, right? Yes, and all of that, and I think that, and I'm just going to talk out loud. I mean, I think our management team now, the one we have now, is doing a very good job. And when we come talk to the members about this. I think a lot of times we're not marginalizing it, but we're saying, well, I know what this person said, but this is really the way it is, okay? But there's something here, okay? Obviously, you've been incarcerated and you have been involved with this, okay? So there's something here, and I think the day's the 14th. I think there is something the department can do now. They don't have to wait for maybe legislation to pass. Okay, there's something you can do now. And we have to make sure we have secure facilities. We're not encouraging other bad behaviors. Because I could flip that. I could say for the legislature to have to pass something, okay, maybe an indictment. And the point is, this is a great leadership team we have in TDCJ. We have a young lady that is the assistant warden or director for institutions. Obviously a young lady, okay, lady. So we can figure this out.
Agreed.
And we shouldn't have to wait until
May.
bills go in on September 1st to figure this out. Chair recognizes Representative J.D.
So, Chairman, am I hearing you say maybe we could use some common sense?
Yes.
And
I am
we
all
don't
about
have
that.
to. You know, we always hear around this building less government.
Right.
What's
Well,
this about?
and look, I'm a politician. I'm narcissistic, so I like to see my names on bills, right? but I think I'm just listening to some things and look like we can just pivot, because if I believe I understood where a previous one of our witnesses where they were coming from with the size of the agency, the age of the agency, and trying to turn that ship around. I think this is one of our most reform-minded, rehabilitative-minded management teams that we have now on deck now. Okay, so look, we have 1, 2, 3. I think it's 3. We have 3 very accomplished women on this panel. I think they could huddle up with them next week and take them out to some of these units and figure it out. I mean, we're going to still do the bills now because we're going to have bootstraps and suspenders, okay? But I think we can figure this out and we can get this on the road. And that's what I would like to do. I like to open up the newspapers and see where we have figured it out and got it going before the legislature weighed in. Someone else hit a button. I thought I heard someone else hit a button.
I
Okay,
just
go
wanted
ahead.
to say that some of this is on the heels of the reports that TCJC and Lindsay Linder did around women's incarceration issues. And I will say that after those reports came out, because I had been having conversations with women on Crane and other units that I know, and I was getting reports that they were already, they hadn't been receiving their tampons for a while, and they had started back getting tampons again. So I will say they are responsive, and that I look forward to being able to create some solutions together with everybody.
We got a great team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Chair recognizes